American Airlines just proved that aviation's biggest comeback story is real. Orders for the Boeing 737 MAX are surging. Airlines, everyone expected to choose Airbus, are choosing Boeing instead, and the reasons will surprise you completely. Just a few years ago, the idea that Boeing 737 MAX orders would surge again in the United States sounded almost impossible. After two tragic accidents, a global grounding, and years of intense regulatory scrutiny, many observers believed airlines might permanently move away from the aircraft. Confidence had been deeply damaged. The program appeared potentially finished. Airbus was positioned to capture the entire narrow-body market by default. Yet today, in May 2026, the situation looks completely different. Major US airlines are committing to large orders. Production plans are expanding. The Boeing 737 MAX has returned to the center of long-term fleet strategies across the country. The reasons behind this reversal are not what most people assume. This is not simply about forgiveness or forgetting. Something more fundamental is driving these decisions. Something rooted in economics, timing, and operational realities that airlines cannot ignore. Start with the timing problem. US airlines are expanding again, domestic travel remains strong, international demand continues recovering, and simultaneously, a massive fleet replacement cycle is accelerating across the industry. A significant portion of narrow-body aircraft currently flying in the United States were built in the early to mid-2000s. These jets served airlines well for nearly 2 decades. But they are now reaching a point where heavier maintenance requirements, rising fuel consumption, and newer passenger expectations make continued operation increasingly uncompetitive. For carriers operating fleets of older Boeing 737NG aircraft, the MAX arrives at exactly the right moment. The generational transition was coming regardless of the MAX's troubled history. The question was which aircraft would fill these retiring slots. Fuel efficiency became the decisive factor. Fuel consistently represents one of the largest costs in any airline's operating structure. Even modest improvements matter enormously when multiplied across thousands of flights annually. The MAX delivers meaningful fuel burn reductions compared to previous Boeing 737 models. The CFM, LEAP engines, and advanced winglet design contribute significantly to these improvements. Lower operating costs per seat change route economics substantially. On high-frequency domestic routes, these savings accumulate rapidly. An airline operating hundreds of daily flights compounds the efficiency advantage across every single sector. Over years of operation, the financial difference between a MAX and an older narrow-body becomes transformational. One of the clearest signals of renewed confidence came in early 2026 when Alaska Airlines announced the largest aircraft order in its history. The airline committed to dozens of additional Boeing 737 MAX 10 aircraft, reinforcing its strategy of maintaining a streamlined, all-Boeing mainline fleet. Alaska has long emphasized fleet commonality. When an airline operates a single aircraft family, pilots require fewer type ratings. Maintenance teams specialize in one system. Spare parts logistics become dramatically simpler. By expanding MAX orders, Alaska doubled down on this operational efficiency philosophy. Then came the announcement that shocked even more observers. Delta Airlines placed an order for the Boeing 737 MAX 10. Delta had leaned heavily toward Airbus narrow-body aircraft in recent years. Choosing Boeing's largest MAX variant sent a powerful signal across the industry. Delta's decision was not emotional, it was analytical. Airline planners looked past the controversies and examined long-term realities, fleet growth requirements, operating cost projections, delivery availability. The MAX 10 answered these questions more effectively than alternatives. The MAX family's flexibility also serves US airlines exceptionally well. American carriers operate in remarkably diverse route environments. A Monday morning business shuttle between major cities requires completely different capacity management than a weekend leisure flight to beach destinations. The Boeing 737 MAX family allows airlines to scale capacity across several variants while maintaining full cockpit and operational compatibility. Pilots trained on one MAX variant can fly others with minimal additional qualification. Maintenance procedures transfer across the family. This flexibility lets carriers tailor capacity to specific routes without introducing operational complexity. Delivery timing created additional urgency that intensified purchasing decisions. The aerospace industry is still recovering from supply chain disruptions that slowed production globally. Airbus production lines are heavily booked for years ahead. Airlines looking to expand or replace aircraft within reasonable timeframes face limited choices. Boeing's plan to increase Boeing 737 production rates made delivery positions particularly valuable. Airlines are not just buying aircraft performance. They are securing future capacity before backlogs extend even further into the 2030s. An airline that delays ordering could find itself waiting until 2032 or later for aircraft it needs in 2028. This scarcity dynamic transformed the competitive landscape. Airlines that might have preferred waiting to observe the MAX's ongoing performance recovery felt pressure to commit. Hesitation means losing delivery slots that competitors will immediately occupy. When Airbus and Boeing compete for the same narrow-body orders, U.S. airlines operating large Boeing 737 NG fleets face a different calculation than carriers without existing Boeing exposure. The A320neo family, particularly the A321neo, has built an enormous global backlog and a reputation for range and versatility. The A321neo enables longer routes with narrow-body economics. For carriers already operating Airbus fleets, the appeal is clear. Cockpit consistency across A319, A320, and A321 simplifies training and scheduling. But for U.S. airlines operating hundreds of Boeing 737 NG aircraft, transitioning to Airbus requires abandoning enormous existing infrastructure investment. Pilot type ratings would change. Simulators would need replacement. Maintenance programs would rebuild from scratch. Parts inventories would require complete overhaul. The financial cost of switching manufacturers across a large narrow-body fleet is staggering. When an airline operates 300 narrow-body aircraft and wants to transition to a different manufacturer's product, the transition costs can reach hundreds of millions before a single passenger boards. Transitioning to the MAX allows these airlines to retain pilot certifications, avoid major simulator investments, and continue using existing maintenance infrastructure. Operational continuity has enormous financial value that never appears directly on aircraft comparison spreadsheets, but absolutely drives fleet decisions. Copa Airlines demonstrated in April 2026 that this logic extends beyond American borders. The Panamanian carrier committed to 60 Boeing 737 MAX jets, maintaining its all-Boeing fleet strategy. Copa rejected Airbus despite operating in a region where both manufacturers compete aggressively. Boeing's broader recovery trajectory also reinforces airline confidence. Steady MAX deliveries demonstrate improving production stability. Cash flow projections are strengthening. Analysts see Boeing positioning for future production expansion. These signals reassure airlines that Boeing can support their fleet plans through the 2030s and beyond. However, the MAX's resurgence does not eliminate all risk. Boeing continues operating under intense FAA oversight. Regulatory supervision covers everything from inspection routines to manufacturing processes. Certification of the Boeing 737 MAX 10 remains especially important. Several major U.S. airlines are relying on this variant specifically for future growth. Any certification delay would ripple directly into delivery schedules and network planning. Supply chain pressures persist across the aerospace industry. Aircraft production depends on vast networks of suppliers. Many are still rebuilding capacity after years of disruption. Increasing production rates requires coordination across hundreds of companies simultaneously. Economic uncertainty introduces additional variables. Fleet decisions are planned years ahead but remain sensitive to fuel prices, travel demand, and broader economic cycles. Large orders typically include options and flexible timelines precisely because market conditions can shift. Despite these risks, the scale of recent MAX commitments from airlines including Alaska, Delta, Copa, and others suggests something beyond short-term recovery. These are long-term commitments reflecting planning decisions stretching decades forward. The real reason U.S. airlines are buying the Boeing 737 MAX in 2026 is not that they forgot what happened. It is that the alternatives cannot overcome the economics, timing, and operational realities driving fleet decisions.